I'm going to do a little tutorial here on how to do some image tracing in Illustrator, and I'm going to use a image for this. So first off, just gonna this is just a drawing, so how to go from drawing to Illustrator. So first thing we're going to do is just make a new document. I am going to go for a larger document just in case we need a larger output. So I'm going to go to New File. I am going to go to Print and Letter. Now obviously you don't need to do that, and if you have a slower computer, you might not want to go bigger, because the bigger your document, the longer it might take you to do stuff. So we could definitely do this in web or smaller, but I'm just going to do letter just in case we do want to make this like a stencil or a print for a shirt or a hat or something like that. So yeah, I'm going to go from there. And important thing here, just when you're setting up your files, obviously, is just to think about all the details that are in here. So I am going to put a title on this, and this is an illustration for my friend Justin. So Justin Art, I'm going to go ahead and name it. Over here in this basic settings, everyone, I'm going to change it to inches just because I don't use points as a measuring system. Inches makes sense to me. It's letter. When it comes to color mode, I also might just go ahead and change this to RGB right now, and I know that is not the standard thing to do when you make a print document, but RGB tends to just be a little bit easier to deal with. So you'll notice a little error message when I do that because it's not a standard thing to do, but this can be changed later, and honestly, it's just going to make life easier when it comes to choosing colors. I am going to leave the raster effects high, which some would argue, and I would agree, that you could make this smaller right now, but I do just want to make this a big document so that Justin has a big document with a big vector file in case he needs that. And orientation, I'm going to go ahead and make it landscape because I know that the illustration is a little bit more landscape. So here we go. Going to go ahead and create the doc. And the first thing I'm going to do after that is I'm going to import the document, which in this case is a drawing. So I'm going to File, Place, and I've got it in my downloads here. Here's this drawing. Now when I go to File, Place, I am going to uncheck link, and that's also because I don't want it to only be linked to the file. I want the file to be embedded into my document. So I'm going to uncheck link, and I'm just going to do a quick place, and I'm going to go ahead and drag it pretty big on the canvas. Obviously all of this can be resized later. Now a couple things that I want to think about, and I'm going to go over here to layers just to think about how I'm going to set up my project. Now, when I'm doing a trace, it's actually nice to look at the trace on a transparent background. So I'm doing Command minus to zoom out here. I actually could just do my work out here, and then I won't get confused by the white document. And that's actually what I'm going to do. I am going to pay attention to what's happening in my layers, though, and I want you to notice that right now it says image. Okay, so I'm zooming out, Command minus, and I'm purposefully bringing my document, my image, outside of my white background just because I won't get confused by the white. And it should be pretty easy to just image trace this, and you'll notice image trace is asking to be pressed down here. A couple things I'm going to do, though, just to make my life easier. I'm going to go to Window, Workspace, and I'm a big fan of Essentials Classic. That's just going to give me some buttons at the top of the screen. It's going to give me image trace up there. It's going to bring the tools to where I like them, and image trace is there as well. And just because in Illustrator there's a lot of redundancy, we can also go to Window, and if we go down, not Appearance, my bad, but if I go to Window and I go down here, I also will find image trace. So literally you could have pressed image trace from the top of the screen, from the button, all of them would work. I'm just going to go to Window, Image Trace, because it's just kind of the old school way to do it, and it brings out the window, and I just like being able to see everything here. So I'm looking at this drawing right now, and this was a drawing that seemingly is made with one color on a also white background. So the tracing should be pretty easy. If you look at the presets here, there's a couple options. If you had multiple colors, you could choose like 3 color, 6 color, 16. In this case, we should be actually pretty good with the default function. So the only thing I'm going to change is under advanced. Is if I have a white background, I'm going to hit ignore the white. So I'm going to open up advanced. I'm going to leave it on default. We can change this later anyway, because I think it's going to do a pretty good trace. And I'm also just going to change it to color as well. And I'll explain this stuff later. You don't really need to worry about it too much. Just this image tracing is pretty amazing. So let's go to advanced. Let's go to ignore color. And when I hit ignore color, I'm going to want it to ignore white. So I can actually just sample the white. So again, ignore color. And I want it to sample white. So I'm just going to leave that alone. So ignore color. I do want it to ignore white while we're tracing. So then I should just be able to now hit preview. It's going to tell me it's going to take a while, and that's okay. And I'm going to let it. Now, if it does this, you're wondering, okay, that didn't come up with anything. Well, this is where we can increase the threshold and experiment with this for a little bit. So you'll notice it's thinking while I'm doing that. So if you're not seeing anything, that's okay. I just had to move my threshold. Now, when my threshold was lower, there was nothing. So if you get that, if you feel frustrated, don't worry about it. It's okay. Just adjust your threshold. And that's going to allow the computer to kind of have more content to work with. So I do want to do this. I don't want to go too far. I'm going to show you too far. And then sometimes too far, I might lose some detail. If I go extremely too far, sometimes it'll do that. It'll pixelate and it'll turn into a mess. So we want to find a happy medium. Looks like we had to get to like 180 or 200. And I'd say that looks pretty good. This could be modified later. That's what's the awesome thing about using image trace. But to me, this looks pretty good. I'm going to do Command minus. I'm holding spacebar to pan as I zoom in. And panning lets me go left and right. Again, I moved it off of the white page so I don't get confused by the white. And here I could modify the corners and the paths. So I could increase the path value as it says there. You can change that. I might not notice any differences, which is good. That means I don't really need to do too much. Corners, I might bump that up a little bit. Again, not really noticing anything. Sometimes you can just kind of leave it as is, and I think I am just going to leave it as is because it actually looks pretty good. So now, a couple things that I want to do. Here is the thing where it says mode. It's set to black and white, and this is the thing that sometimes confuses people a little later. If you leave it on black and white, you'll have to make the object have a color option, which can be kind of annoying. So I do want to show you though, when I choose color, which is awesome. If I had multiple colors, it kind of does a worse job. So I am going to go back to black and white. And I know this might seem a little confusing, but you'll see why later. Just remember that the mode was black and white. And we'll have to do a little change in a minute. But anyway, this looks good. Again, all I really had to do was press image trace, and I had to hit the ignore color button. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'd say it's pretty good. And then the next thing I'm going to do is at the top of the screen, I'm going to hit expand. And if you don't see expand, I believe it's going to also be under object expand appearance. You'll be able to find it there too. But there's an expand up here as well. So let's hit expand. And that's looking pretty good. So now the other thing that you'll want to do, and again, it's kind of built in for you. That's what I like about the new version of Illustrator. It's got all the buttons that I want to press are just ready for me. But I do just kind of want to show you the long way so you understand it. While this is amazing, it's in a group, which may or may not be what you want. So usually you're going to go to object and ungroup after, usually, because that way you have control of every little piece of it. And you'll notice again, ungroup was available there. Now, the only other thing I would want to do now is modify the colors, because let's say I know that I want to make my logo blue and red and orange and all kinds of other stuff. Right now, if you were to take a look at the color settings for our project, you'll notice it's in black and white. And this throws a lot of people off sometimes because they'll try to change the color. They'll go over here and they'll say like, okay, cool, I can make my logo red. And it should work like it did here. But sometimes you'll notice, especially with older versions of Illustrator, that it gets annoying. Like you see what happens here. I chose red and then I'm like, why is it gray? And then I'm going to double click here. I'm like, all right, no, let me try green. And then I'm like, okay, cool. I'm like, why is it gray? Oh, it's gray because when you traced it and you trace it in black and white mode, it stays that way. So if you go to the color window, which you can also access by going to window color and click up here, window color, that's the little palette icon, you can change this to RGB. Now we're cooking. We're good. Now it should be any color that we want. So just again, these little steps are kind of necessary, and you'll notice that they were kind of like built into the settings down here, a lot of the things that we needed. But in other words, the steps were, we did image trace, we did ignore white or ignore color. Now it's called ignore color. It used to be called ignore white in previous versions. We had to make sure we clicked on preview. And then once we did that, we did the expand, and now we did ungroup. So now we have a great object to work with in my layers here. I have individual paths, and that's exactly what I want. So you'll notice in a good way, it's separated the star. It's an independent object. So that's just something to note for later. If you are working on a design that has spaces, the computer will usually cut that space. If you don't want that space, you could try to group things later if need be. But let's take a look at this now, and let's say we wanted to modify something. So I'm going to zoom in, Command plus, and you'll notice I'm still floating away from my white document. Again, I'm just doing that based out of habit. I know that when I'm dealing with traces, sometimes the white will confuse me, so I just like to go away. And then obviously later I'll move it back. Now, one thing you might want to do, just out of habit, is save it right now. So I'm going to do a file and save as, and that way I just back up my file as it is. I don't like saving to the cloud. I really actually hate that. I'd rather just save it. So I'm going to save this right now to my desktop, and I am going to save it in an AI format, Illustrator format. That way it's going to keep all this information. Now, while I'm saying that, and I do want to warn you, if you do save your objects outside of your canvas and your canvas is too big for your computer's memory, sometimes that can cause a problem. So before I'm done today, I am going to move everything back. But right now I'm just doing a quick save so I don't lose my work while I'm working. Okay, let's talk about modifying the shape and then doing other things to it. So if we take a look here, this looks beautiful. It's a great design. If there were some places where I wanted to modify, this is where now I'd want to bring in my direct selection tool. So if I grab my white arrow, direct selection, I can click on the object. So I'm going to zoom in even more. And the beauty of what happened with image trace is that Illustrator has created a curve and a pattern. Now, if I want to adjust it, and I'm going to keep zooming in here, if I look for the white little squares, those are actually the points, okay? And then each of those little white squares has these two little handlebars. And sometimes you don't need that square, or sometimes you just want to modify the handlebar. So here's that little square. Here's another little square. I feel like this little thing could probably get adjusted just a little bit. Maybe just smooth it. And again, Justin might decide to not, but I just want to show you. So if I go to the little dots, I can move the point. That's cool. But sometimes you want to do like a micro adjustment, and that's where the handlebars come into play. This gets a little bit tricky sometimes. The more you practice it, the more you'll feel for it. But again, the square is the point or the vector point, and the handlebar controls the curvature. Now, sometimes you actually might want to get rid of a point because there's just too many. And in that case, you can actually use the pen tool, and there's a delete. So I'm hovering over my pen tool, going to delete. And in delete, I could actually go to and find those little anchor points that I don't need. Like maybe I don't need that one. And actually, maybe I don't need that one. And you know what? That might solve my problem, just getting rid of some points. But you know what? Maybe I still want to fix that curve. Okay, I'm going to go back to the white arrow. And I'm going to click on my little point. And then I can use the little handlebar here to adjust. Now, you'll notice the handlebar adjusts the curve. But sometimes, depending on the way that the object was created, you might not have control of each side. So just notice that the handlebar will control the curve coming from that point. So just look for both handlebars. You also will notice, and I'm going to undo this because I know I might make a mess, but you'll notice as I'm doing this, sometimes the actual curve, or I should say vector point, where they're connecting is not really curving enough. And that is another thing we can do. So if I'm clicking on the point itself, right, I can go up here to where it says convert at the top of the screen, and I can do convert selected anchor points to smooth, and that will smooth it. Now, that might have been a very subtle thing, but I'm going to press Command Z so you can see it. Before, it was pointy there. It's ever so slightly pointy. And then when I hit Convert to Smooth, it got smooth. And to me, that actually is amazing, and it's a quick little fix. And all I did was I turned that point from being a triangular point into a curve. I'm going to try to show you that again somewhere else. Let's see if we can maybe fix one over here. So I'm going to zoom in on the star. So you see there's this little crunchy point here. And I'm using my white arrow to find it. And this might be a great place to do a couple of the things we just talked about, like minus. You can delete anchor points, like you don't need them. I maybe don't need that one. Oh, and sometimes I might mess up, so I want to be careful. I don't want to delete too much. And I got to land right on the point. Like you see, that was great. But what if that was too much? What if that actually kills the design? And that might be it, right? So maybe that's not what Justin wants. So what I'm going to zoom in here and show you is that you can also do, and I'm doing Command plus and zooming, what I was mentioning earlier, there we go, is that thing about the anchor points and the handlebars. So if you click on them here, you'll notice the way these work, right? So sometimes some of them, instead of being curved or angled, you want to make them pointy, or you want to make them round. So it looks like both of these were already round, so it's not changing much. So I am probably just going to do a little bit of hand movement here, move these guys down, and adjust the handles bar a little bit. So you see that, just kind of fixing that curve. Now again, I might have just been better off erasing it. That's something that you as the artist, you can decide. I'm noticing a little weird point over here. And that's where the computer does a great job of tracing, but sometimes it does things you don't need. So actually, that's a great place to probably delete. So I'm going to grab the minus and delete, right? And that looks pretty good. So I smoothed that out. And I'll go over this thing again just in another way to show you, but just your tools right now are minusing points and also using the white arrow to change the handlebar. So I would go around this and just start to fix any of those little crunchy zones, because again, the computer is good at tracing what you created, but it doesn't know what you're creating. So it doesn't always know it or make the right decision. So like here's another little crunch zone, and should I just delete this? I could go to minus and get rid of that guy. It kind of messes up that curve, so maybe not. Maybe I'll delete that one. Sure, that looks pretty cool. Maybe this guy, right? You see how this point is really pointy? When I drag it, maybe this one would actually benefit from converting if it needs to be converted. I think it was already converted. So then it was fine. Yeah, but there you go, just modified. And yeah, I would go around and fix that around everywhere. Any other place that needs to be cut or modified. Here's another thing you can do. Let's look at the star. I want to try to find it. Thankfully, this is a really neat drawing, but if you ever find places that are rough, I'm going to show you another thing. So let's go here, right? You see how there's a lot of points here. Another thing you can do is you can use the smooth tool. So if you go into your toolbar, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th one down. It's called the smooth tool. If you have an active path like I have selected, you can grab the smooth tool. And with this guy, you just go around and auto smooth. I don't know about that. I'm going to try it again. Sometimes Illustrator, the tools have changed a little bit since the last time I've used them, but let's try that again. Yeah, there we go. You have to make sure it was selected. And I'll undo that so you guys can see it again. You see, I got rid of that little bump there. So I selected my path, grab and smooth, and then I just go around the active path. And it smooths out that bump. So if there was a lot of other little bumpy zones, like kind of a little bump over here, can smooth it out. And this is great. Now, you don't want to do it too much because sometimes it'll actually kill your art if you have like a very specific thing you're doing. But I'm just going to do some quick ones here where it looks like it could be smooth. And I don't want to do too much because I might kill it. I see one over here, so I'm going to smooth that out. And if you pass on it a couple times, it'll keep smoothing. And it's actually removing the amount of vector points, those little squares. So that's actually good. You'll be happy about it later. It's like less stuff to deal with. and smooth over here. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to go to the star. So let's go to the white arrow, click this guy. I'm going to do a little bit of smoothing here. Feel like this could be smoothed out a little bit. Again, I don't want to do too much because I might kill the art. So that's like the fine line. So that should be good. That should give you a lot of power to what we want to do here. So let's go back to, let's close the image trace. I'm going to actually minimize properties here. That window that popped out, you can make your windows bigger and smaller by using those double arrows. And I'm going to go back to layers. Now I got both of these things and I want to move them at the same time. So layer 1, I'm just going to click on the little dot up here next to the word layer 1. That lets me select everything. And then I'm going to be able to move it. Okay, so now we're almost done here. So now what else can we do to this? We can do a lot. So let's say we wanted to add a stroke on the outside. Now that this object has been traced and expanded, we now can decide, okay, cool, I'm going to make a green inside, and I'm just picking colors at random. I'm just going to pick complementary so you guys can see it. I'm going to do red on the outside. So I'm going to give it a red stroke, and I'm going to increase that stroke by a lot just to show you some errors and things that might happen. So you guys will notice right now I'm giving it this thick stroke, which is, it looks kind of weird. It's kind of killing the art. What can you do there? Well, go to Window and go down to Stroke, and then in Stroke, I'm going to expand this window, show options, just so you see all the details. One of the best things to do is just notice as how it's going to align to the stroke. So I had to go to expand options to show this, but you can make it so your stroke aligns to the center, which is kind of messy. I actually could do it to the inside, which is even weirder, but I probably want to do this guy on the outside. So then the stroke is now not hurting my art and it exists on the outer edge. Probably a little too heavy on that. And honestly, guys, my colors are kind of a little annoying. But again, I just want to show you two very drastic colors so you can really kind of think about this and see the difference. And I'll show you one other little thing while we're here. I'm going to make this stroke a little bit thinner. I'm going to go down to like 3. Let's say you wanted to have a multiple stroke. This is a great thing to do in appearance. So if you go to Window and then you go to Appearance, what you can do there is you can apply multiple strokes. So we're going to go to the layer. Now the catch is that you'll notice if I go to Appearance, I'm going to keep this window open. When I clicked on the whole group, it was being kind of weird and not showing me all the details, but when I click on the individual paths, it can. So I'm just going to actually do on the individual path just so you can see it better, and then we can apply it later. But I click on the individual path. So I'm going to click on the use swear part, and then here's the green and red, right? Now let's say you wanted to add an outline on top of an outline, so a stroke on a stroke. This is where you can do it in the Appearance tab. So if I go here to my fill and stroke, I can actually add another fill or another stroke. I'm going to add another stroke. Now when you first apply it, you won't notice it. So just think about this. You did 2 outlines around an object. So I'm going to change the color here to blue. Okay, now I know you're thinking, okay, well, I just hid the red. Well, let's think about it. These are stacked. So actually, if I increase the blue stroke, right, and now I take this stroke, it's like a layer, and I bring this guy up, I can have blue and red at the same time. Okay, so I'm going to stack my strokes. So it actually might be better, might be more logical to probably do this in black and, then do this in another color. But you can do multiple strokes on the object. So this is something I really like. You'll see this a lot in kind of like more classic logos. Like if you think of kind of like cleaning products or food products, you'll often see these double strokes. So I did this to the use swear. What about our little star? Well, I can actually copy this appearance from the use swear to the little star. I can do that actually by going to the little dot here, and you'll notice it says click to target, drag, or move appearance. I'm going to hold Alt, and I'm going to drag that little dot down, and boom. That applies it to both. So I'm feeling pretty good about this. I'd say this is actually looking pretty good. I might want to go back, change colors. Obviously, Justin's are that it's green. It's probably not what you want, but at least I just wanted to make sure you can see all the details very clearly. Now, again, the other thing, guys, with the appearance is this, you don't have to live with it. So if you don't like those multiple strokes, you can just turn them off. So I can just go to each individual chunk here and then turn off those individual strokes, right? So I just can go back to normal. Now, again, all the things that we talked about, you can still go in there and modify. You can still change things. You can still use that pen tool to delete and add points. Remember, we use smooth. And obviously, if you just want to dig in real quick with moving the points yourself, you can use white. Okay, so I think this should cover the basics of taking your illustration and tracing it in Illustrator. Showed you kind of the big things. Obviously, if you guys have more questions, please just let me know. And thanks and shout out to Justin for sharing his artwork with me. And hopefully he'll send me some links and we can link his Instagram and his art page and stuff on here too. And yeah, I think we're good, guys. I think what I do now is I remember I mentioned earlier that when you are done, make sure you bring your artwork back to the center. So I am bringing my artwork back to the center because there is glitches sometimes when you leave your artwork on the outside, especially if your computer's a little bit slower. So I moved everything back. I'm going to do another save. Boom. And now you could, if you wanted to, export it to different methods. So if you wanted to do PNG, etc., you could keep going and going. But that should hopefully help out. And please let me know if you have any other questions, everybody. And thanks for watching. Feel free to comment with anything else you might need to know. And have a great day.